And that's a good thing. So from the very beginning, there was this model that said, someone will tell us what to do, which goes against the grain for at least half of us who bend the knee to no man, and the others who said, well, someone needs to tell us what to do because there's a right way and the wrong way. So we started out at the beginning, we are still fighting that, and if we're lucky, we will continue to be having this argument 150, 200 years from now. What makes America fascinating is the dynamic. The dynamic. And we swing a little this way, we swing a little that way, but nobody is ever totally in charge. Mark my words. Be fearful of the day that we're all on the same page. Be very fearful for that day. I don't want to see it. All right, but let's go a little bit deeper. So there is this dichotomy, right? And why would there be 50% of Americans who disagree with others? Let me give you this list of things. If you Google 50% of Americans disagree, or 50% of Americans, etc., here's the list you're going to get back. Ready? 50% of Americans don't believe in the American dream, which means 50% do. 50% of Americans don't believe, or believe, that the lottery will provide their retirement. 50% of Americans don't. 50% of Americans pay no taxes, 50% of Americans pay taxes. 50% of Americans believe still that poinsettias are toxic. 50% of Americans believe that there is a hell, and they believe that the other 50 belong in it. 50% of Americans believe that weapons of mass destruction were in Iraq, and the other don't. Who's right? Only God knows, and I haven't spoken to him the last week. Okay. 50% of Americans are satisfied with the cost of health care, oppose stricter gun control, have very little or no confidence in Congress. Only 50%? Say they're worse off now than they were, are unsatisfied with their sex life. They must be dating the other half. What else? Housing chickens in cages is not humane. Only 50. Do you see the pattern? It's almost invariably half believe one thing and half believe the other. Support amnesty, are anti-free trade, believe abortion is moral. And this is my favorite. 50% of Americans don't know that hand sanitizers only last for 2 minutes. Okay. So the question obtains, what the hell is wrong with those people? What is it that makes them so obstreperously ignorant? Well, we could look at it this way. It must be a list of things. Because if you really look at American statistics, it's a little scary. 30% of Americans have alcohol problems. Well, that explains some of it. We got 10% use illicit drugs, abuse that, 50% have low. Oh, I know 50% of Americans have IQs that are lower than the other 50%. That's why. What's interesting about that is that's by definition a fact, because median IQ, etc., right? But we jump on that one. Average American only reads at an 8th grade level. So whenever you're having a conversation with someone with whom you do not agree, remind yourself that he's only a child. Just a child. Most importantly, only 1 in 8, that's 12% of the average Americans over the age of 18 can actually pass an American history test. Maybe that's why we don't agree. We don't know what the hell we're talking about. It would be really nice if from now on, before you opened your mouth, you would kind of identify yourself. Say, I think at an 8th grade level, I'm stupid and I'm wrong. Let's go on with the conversation. Once again, it's not as simple as that. So those may be reasons that we subscribe to. But let me tell you what's really going on in America. America is a country concocted of 2 trichotomies. So I introduce you to the idea of the singularity, which is Americans. Then there's the dichotomy, us, them. Now let's really look at the facts. First of all, when you talk about Americans, you have to recognize that there is what I call a fundamental trichotomy. There are 3 kinds of Americans in the world, or in America rather. There are what you would call foundational Americans. Foundational Americans would be the children of the founders and the founders themselves. There's only can be so many of those, right? You have to be here at the start. There you go. Foundational Americans. Those are the people who are here at the start. So we know that they are, how did the Germans sneak in there? We used to have lots of Irish and English. We assume we're Scottish, but lots of Germans as well. Those are foundational Americans, okay? The next kind of Americans are what I call situational Americans. People who are Americans simply because they happen to be in America. They could be the bad children of good foundational Americans. They could be any number of things, but they just showed up for any number of reasons, or they were brought here, just happened to be here. So could they share all of the things that we talk about when we say the next thing, which is archetypal Americans? You guys know what an archetype is. That's like the pure essence of something. So an archetypal American would be an American who is an American, regardless of the fact that he may or may not be in America. I believe an interesting thing happens. If you're an immigrant of the right stripe, an archetypal American, and you're living in Bangladesh, you are still an archetypal American. How do I know that? Because invariably, when you come to America, you're coming home, and you know it. That's how I feel about America. I was an American long before I ever got here. Remember John Denver? Some of you may remember John Denver was a singer. And one of the lyrics in one of his songs was coming home to a place he'd never been before. The archetypical American is somebody who may one day come to America, but is already an American long before that. By the way, that's happening more and more. We have pre-Americanized immigrants now. People who basically think like Americans, talk like Americans, spend like Americans, believe they're Americans, and then eventually actually become Americans. Interesting thing. But that's not the only archetype there is out there. There's another one. And the other archetype is even more fun. I call it the operational trichotomy. This is original stuff. You will never see this outside of my book because it comes from data that